In 1987, a game called Double Dragon hit arcades. There had been games in what came to be known as the beat-em-up genre before then, but Double Dragon became the first game in the style to truly become an international hit. It was the top arcade cabinet in the country for 2 years running in the late 80s, and Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it Game of the Year in 1988. Publisher Taito found that success with one simple innovation. It let you play with a friend. Two-player cooperative gameplay took what could be a repetitive and lonely experience and made it into a fun, involving exercise in you and a pal knocking some heads. This inspired all sorts of follow-ups, offshoots, and imitators. The two most successful series were Capcom's Final Fight and Sega's Streets of Rage, which followed the same formula but gained an audience anyway because of their charming co-op gameplay. In 1997, developer Core Design, fresh off the success of the adventure smash hit Tomb Raider, pitched a fourth Streets of Rage game to Sega, who turned them down, saying they had their own sequel in the works. That sequel, in typical Sega fashion, wouldn't get made until 2020, and of course had nothing to do with Sega other than licensing out the property. Anyway, Core decided to go off and develop their own original beat-em-up called Fighting Force, scripted by Image Comics CEO Mark Silvestri. There's some sort of a story about a doomsday cult leader who decides to destroy the world himself after Y2K began unapocalyptically, but it's mostly just a flimsy excuse to allow you and a friend to take on wave after wave of faceless bad guys, with wacky weapons and jump kicks. I owned the slightly upscaled Nintendo 64 port of Fighting Force, and even as it was indefensively repetitive and brain-dead stupid, it remained in my collection for many years because it was such an easy game to pick up and play when I had a friend over and we wanted something fun to do. It fulfilled this role so well, it's my go-to reference when discussing the beat-em-up genre. Core got to work on a sequel, Fighting Force 2, that came out a little over 2 years after the first game. I had never played Fighting Force 2 because it didn't come out on cartridge, and I had always wondered why I never heard anything about it or never saw it slip into anyone's rotations for systems it actually released on. Why I never had a friend with a PS1 pop it in when I came over the way I did with Fighting Force 1. Well, powering up my Dreamcast recently, I got my answer, because it's not a Fighting Force game. Well, okay, it's literally a Fighting Force game. It's called Fighting Force 2. It's developed by the creators of Fighting Force 1. It stars Hawk Manson, one of the original game's protagonists. But it's unrecognizable as a sequel to Fighting Force. The game is set in the near future, has a convoluted plot about an evil corporation doing illegal cloning experiments, and most catastrophically baffling of all, is a one-player game. What sort of self-respecting beat-em-up limits you to a solo experience? Well, Fighting Force 2 is also not a beat-em-up. Structurally, it is in fact a third-person shooter. You obtain a gun almost immediately, and throughout the game, you acquire a pretty hefty roster of firearms, never once needing to punch anyone, much less get to experience the joys of beating someone with a shish kebab or landing a perfect flying dropkick. Instead, it functionally, structurally, plays a lot more like Tomb Raider, or better, a really dumbed-down version of Siphon Filter, which had released earlier in the year, and Fighting Force 2 bears a striking resemblance to. Except its lunkheaded procedural aims leave absolutely no space for any sort of stealth. You're a dude, you have a gun, and you're gonna shoot some other dudes, who are both bigger and much stupider than you, and go down in an amusingly realistic number of shots, rarely finding a man it takes more than 2 bullets to make disappear. Also, everything explodes! Not for any reason, really. You get an extra health or ammo reload every probably 12th exploding thing, but instead, mostly just cause, woo, explosions! A thing the game is so committed to, that you can kick a wooden chair until it explodes, like your f***ing Master Shake. The graphics look okay, although everything is relentlessly dour and literally dark, and the enemies are so sparse and the AI so stupid that it's hard to get too excited about any particular situation. Hawk is a blank slate nothing of a protagonist, which would be fine if there was anything compelling about the way he played, but so much of this game is determined to take the blandest possible route to any end goal. It honestly doesn't look meaningfully better than the PS1 version, although I think that's a credit to the 32-bit production, and not necessarily a detriment to the 128-bit machine. But Fighting Force 2 is determined to not give you anything much worth looking at, as the game is set almost entirely in empty, gunmetal gray, concrete-style corridors, shrouded in darkness and low light. The original game went all over the place, from hotel lobbies to subway stations to literally outside in the sunlight, so this pouty drabness was yet another disappointment. I actually went back and played the original PlayStation version of Fighting Force for this project, and found it pretty lackluster and sorta tedious on first glance as well, until I remembered the skeleton key for beat-em-up games. I got a friend to play with me. Then suddenly it became the rollicking, stupid good time I remembered, just barreling through levels doing flying jump kicks and hitting people with random objects, laughing all the while, ha ha ha. Like Soul Fighter, Fighting Force 2 gives me even more appreciation for the deceptively difficult things Dynamite Cop pulled off in the beat-em-up genre, and that game grows in my esteem more and more with every one I play. Fighting Force 2, on the other hand, is a nothing game that handcuffs itself with every decision it makes. And if there wasn't this video evidence, soon I might forget I had ever played it at all. Next time, I feel like after the 5th test drive, they just make you buy the car.